Hello, my YouTube friends. I hope you're doing well. I was asked from one of the viewers if I could talk about my worst day trading. So I thought not only would I talk about the day, but I'd also talk about the pit and how it works and kind of show you and tell you some stories from when I was on the trading floor. I hope you guys find it interesting. It was super cool and a really fun time in my life. So hopefully I do a good job of telling some of the stories and explaining it, and you find it really interesting. Now, I've talked in a few videos about how early on I started in being interested in markets and everything else. When I graduated college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up in New York. My stepfather had a little t-shirt business. I figured I'd spend a little time at home after graduation, and they talked to me about maybe managing and potentially taking over eventually because he was hoping to retire at some point. Knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. And my brother called me up and was like, hey, I started working out here at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in Chicago. It's super cool. You may want to come out and check it out. Well, like him, loved markets. So it sounded like a great opportunity. I was a little nervous about moving somewhere I didn't know, but the next thing I knew, packing the car up, heading out, really no plan in sight other than maybe I'll take some time, learn the city and whatever else while I maybe go interview if he can set one up and see what I think of the exchange. Next thing I know, it couldn't have been maybe a week into moving out there and I'm interviewing and really thinking this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. To me, it was like, now I live here in Vegas now, but back in the day, I remember taking a trip out and they used to have like this moving sidewalk to get into Caesars that would go through the sports book. Now there was no moving sidewalk at the exchange, but I remember going through that entrance at Caesars and seeing all the numbers on the walls from all the gambling and the sports bets and everything else, and it just looked so cool. And when I walked onto the floor the first time during the interview and saw all the different things, and I didn't know what they were, but it's similar, just all of those numbers up on the wall and the people yelling and screaming and running around, the energy was just so cool. Was like I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what it entailed, but I kind of knew I wanted to be down there doing something. So I interview with this guy Elliot at a company called Lynn Waldock. It's where a lot of people get started. It's really just, a retail company where customers, for the most part, put orders in and goes to the markets and gets filled from there. So I'll try to go through it real quick instead of rambling about my beginnings as a clerk. But I originally started at Lind Waldock. Everybody down there works for different companies. So just by chatting and meeting and learning and getting better at what you do creates opportunities for moving to different companies with better opportunity. Um, Eventually, I was working next to a couple of guys who were the bosses at Sanwa Bank. The funny thing is, Rick Santelli, if you know him on CNBC, he worked in the at the CBOE for actually, I'm sorry, the Board of Trade, the CBOT for Sanwa Bank also. So we actually went to dinner a couple of times because my bosses and him knew each other really well. So I used to work next to this guy Pat and Eddie Moe, and they were the guys who ran the currency desks for Sanwa Bank. They ended up bringing me over. We got along real well. I had an opportunity to write their currency blog as well as work on one of the desks that was a direct line to their trader in New York. When I was working on their direct line with their trader from New York, I was working in the yen pit, so I started to get familiar with the people in the pit. I started to get comfortable with the way that the markets moved, and I always knew that I wanted to trade. The job at Sanwa was actually a pretty good job with good ability to move up, and I ended up going out to New York at one point and meeting the trader out there, and writing the blog probably gave me a lot more credit than I realized. At the time, it was more like something I didn't love to do, but I would go out to all their customers about where we thought the direction of the markets were going, what we saw going on. It was a pretty cool opportunity, even though I just saw it as extra work. But the reality is, I learned from it. Anyway, I knew that I wanted to trade. And at one point, one of the guys in the yen option pit, I knew he was looking for somebody to clerk for him. It was a big downgrade in pay, because your goal when you go and work for one of the traders is really not about the money. It's the opportunity to get into the pits, learn a little bit more, and potential to trade or trade for them at some point. So I went and worked for this guy, Nick. He was in the yen options pit. And Nick and I, like, we never really got along. Our personalities were different. I don't want to say we didn't get along, even though I said that. It was more that we just didn't click quite right. Now, he was trading in the Swiss franc options. It was the guy working beneath him. His name was Jimmy, who I was friendly with, who he was in the yen options, and kind of said, hey, we need a new clerk. Now that Nick started to back me to trade in the pit, why don't you come work for us and see how it goes? Well, Nick was kind enough to give me a little bit of leeway, even though I was a clerk, and kind of said, hey, if you see something he was trading the Swiss franc options. If you see something in the Swiss francs that you think, you want to put on for a trade, feel free to do that. Well, I'd been watching the markets for a while. I was super excited about the opportunity. So I started doing it. And I would buy or sell a one lot here or there. And then I would do the opposite to get out of the trade. And I thought I was doing great. I mean, almost every day for 2 or 3 weeks straight, I was making anywhere from like $200 to $400. And he finally sat me down and said, look, that wasn't my concept. What I intended is, like, if you had an opinion on where the Swiss franc was going, like, feel free to buy one or sell one and we'll see if you're right. He didn't really mean get in and out of trades the way I was. Now, here I was totally confused, thinking I'm making, $1,000 a week or more, and this is back in the 90s when that wasn't such bad income and just extra free money, and he's not happy with what I'm doing. And the next thing I know, he essentially said, I don't think it's going to work out right. And I was totally floored and thrown off guard. At the same time, I felt like, geez, I was doing pretty well. So I scraped together what I could to get enough money to then go through the classes and get approved and go trade. Now I moved back to the yen pit instead of where the Swiss franc was because I was more comfortable with it. But next thing I knew, maybe about a month and a half later, changing the color of my coat because that's the difference between a clerk and a trader, and into the yen pit I went. Sorry, the sun keeps moving and I'm getting this terrible glare. Let me make sure. Yep, still on. Anyway, so this is the basics. Sorry, I keep saying anyway. So this is the basics of what the pit looks like. I'm going to try to look too. So outside around the edges, where you see the people on phones, all around the outside of the pit, those are where customer orders come from. The people all around on the outside of the pit here that are kind of in the pit looking at these people on the phones, those are what are called filling brokers. So when the people who are customers place the orders into the pit, they do the hand signals, and I used to teach them. I'd be happy to show people how to do the hand signals too, into the people who are the filling brokers, and then they would look into the pit to see where the market is, and if the order made sense to just fill it right there where things are trading, they would reach to the guys in the middle that are referred to as locals, and those are people who trade their own accounts, which is what I did, and they'd buy or sell or offer or whatever they would do if it made sense to where the market was at that time. Now, when people would come down and say, oh my God, that's total chaos, how do you even know what's going on or how things work? What I would try to explain is, imagine going to a football game or a basketball game and have never seen the game before and not understanding what goes on. You have the coaches and people on the bench and the cheerleaders and everybody doing all these things around the outside. You have them yelling into the guys in the game, and then the ball moves around, it's thrown out. It would look like total chaos too. The reality is, once you understand the rules and the hand signals and what things mean, it really makes a lot of sense and it's super organized. Now, floor trading is a huge advantage to computer trading. And let me show you why. So all of those filling brokers that I showed you on the outside, similar to what I said, once you understand it and you know the game and the hand signals and everything else, it all makes sense. You start to know who works for what company. So I got Solly, D, and Danny, and they pretty much fill orders for companies like Lind Waldock and other companies that are similar. that are customer orders that are buying and selling the yen, and generally those are good orders to be on the other side of. So when Solly or Danny has an order, it's really good to trade with them. Then you get to other people like Bryce, who works for Morgan Stanley and is the other one on the other side of the pit. Well, both of them are on direct headsets, the same way the way that I was with the guy at Sandlot. What's going on there is they're on the phone with the traders in New York. We're trading the yen against the dollar, and New York is the dollar against the yen in the cash market, which is a little bit bigger than the market at the exchange, and it's actually what drives us to move. So once you realize that Bryce, the other guy who's in at Morgan Stanley, Mike from Smith Barney, and a few others on the direct headsets that are working on with the banks, you know when they start buying the market that that's what's going on in New York over the phones on the other side of the market. And you want to just essentially copy them. So if they start buying, I'll pay a little bit higher to buy in front of them. If they start selling, I'll offer down because generally, whatever direction they're going, the market's going to continue to move in that direction. It's a huge advantage to be able to see who's who, what's going on, and what they're doing. Now, the paper orders are what I've become, and you guys that are just retail customer orders, and we're just floating in the wind, putting our orders in based on where we think the market's going. These guys have so much information at their disposal, and they really know where the market's going. The other huge advantage is that the guys who work for the banks, they know that the locals are just making markets for customer orders. Now, what I mean by that is, the yen right now, I checked a little while ago, is trading around 69.50 at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I don't remember if it's 40 something or 50 something or 30 something, but let's call it 69.50. Well, the locals might be willing to buy it at 69.49 and willing to sell it at 69.51. So they'll be bidding 9 and offering 1. If Morgan Stanley realizes it's 51 bid or 52 bid or 53 bid, they would just come in the pit and say, I'm 52 bid. Now, if there were orders there, they would say buy them. But if it was just the guys making markets for customers, they would just kind of come in and put their bid in. And you didn't have to sell to them if you were just making the market for the customers and you were like, I'll sell 2 at 51. Like Bryce didn't come in the pit and say, I'll buy those, I'll buy those, I'll buy those. He would just come in and say, I'm 52 bid. If you wanted to sell to him still, you absolutely could. But he also recognized you weren't necessarily offering 51s because you wanted to sell it. You were just doing it to keep the market liquid in case an order came in to buy one at the market or whatever it was. That's also a huge advantage. Whereas if I put an order in on the computer, same example, if I went to, let's say, sell one at 69.51, if the banks were like 69.53 bid all of a sudden, well, that order now gets filled at 51 as it's instantly 53 bid. You already have the trade going against you. It's very difficult in a short-term floor trader mentality to be profitable when it's immediately against you like that. Now, as transitioning from the floor to investing, I have a much different perspective, and the way that I trade now is totally different. And I always expect the trades to go against me, and I expect them to go a decent amount against me. I just want to have the position on. Now, I've transformed to kind of probably what Nick wanted to in a trader. But at the time, like, I'm just trying to buy the bid and sell the offer and do that as many times as possible. The other thing I learned is the floor is not sexist, it's not racist, it's not thisist, it's not thatist. It is an equal opportunity hating place. There's only so much business that comes into the pit. Like in general, there's only so many orders a day. And in some ways, it's plenty for everyone, but it's a fight for getting the good orders because you tend to know what's good. Like you all seem to have the same positions on. So when you're all stuck short, you all want to buy and vice versa. So it's very competitive. Well, that means they really don't want anybody new in the pit. And, one of my funniest stories was one of the guys down here, he stood below Solly. His name was Scott Schwab. And if you guys like this video, maybe I'll tell different floor stories because there's a lot of funny things. It's like being in a fraternity or on a team or something else where everybody just, you're kind of friends, but you kind of mess with each other. And it takes a long time to get used to it and know who's your friend and who just doesn't like you, and so forth. So Scott, who was this older gentleman who been trading forever, he started down at the Board of Options Exchange before they even had puts. It was just calls back then. And he'd tell stories about puts ruining his life because he didn't understand them and he got caught in the 1987 crash. He also tells pretty funny story. Let me tell this one before I tell you what he used to do to me and why I don't see the floor any different whether you're man, woman, this, that, or the other. Like, they just pick on everyone. So Scott used to tell this story about, he would fight with his wife and he's going out and they did tons of drugs and he went out and he's drinking and he's doing pills and he's all messed up. And he's like, so, he lives out in the suburbs. It's a good like half-hour drive home. And he's like, oh, the only thing keeping me awake were the sparks. I'm like, sparks? He's like, yeah, every time I was hitting the rails, the car would hit the side rail and sparks would shoot up. I finally got home. I drove through the garage, and I mean into the whatever the room was next to the garage. Next thing he knows, he's getting arrested for driving intoxicated. And these are all the crazy people on this floor. Anyway, so Scott used to come around and make me super uncomfortable. He would flirt with me. He would touch me inappropriately. He would say things, and it just got really uncomfortable. Now, I don't think Scott liked me. I don't think he was flirting with me, but I think he saw an opportunity to make a new trader who was getting trades and making friends and doing okay uncomfortable and try to mess me up from my trades. Now, the way I broke into the pit was, I'm not such a light guy. I'm not real tall, but on the heavier side. And I was even heavier back then. And I joked with one of the guys that I was working with. Well, he joked with me. One of the guys I was working with at San Juan said, what do you think I should get my badge to be? Now, you got to pick what letters you want. You had 3 letters you could choose from. It had to be a minimum of 2, but you could choose 3. And he looks up and he goes, why don't you call yourself Slim? Well, I did. I ended up having my badge SLM. And when I got into the pit, the guys thought it was funny, and they'd be like, I'll sell you one, Slim. And it was a great way that I ended up breaking into the pit. Anyway, Scott was continuously doing this, and I mean for like a year or so. Well, finally, on April Fool's Day, I had a friend of mine who worked in a lawyer's office write up a thing for sexual harassment, naming him as being the one I'm charging with, and me that I'm actually going after him for sexual harassment. So, over the loudspeaker on April Fools, I hear them call Scott Schwab, please come out to the front desk. Because, when people came to visit or anything else, they would just kind of call you over the loudspeaker. You go out. So she's out there all dressed in like, a suit for a woman, kind of comes out, says, are you Scott Schwab? He says, yeah. She hands him the paper and says, you've been served. Comes back on the floor, he starts opening it up and kind of panics. Now, I walk away for a while because I don't want to start laughing or anything else. Just made him pretty nervous, and that kind of changed things. I tell the story, A, to give you an idea of what it was like on the floor. It was a club like that, but they were no different to anybody as they would have been to me. You have people picking on you, giving you a hard time, razzing you, joking, whatever you want to call it. It's not always in good fun, but it's really to get you off your game. It's like anything else. I'm sure professional basketball is the same way, or football, or whatever it is that people do when they get to those competitive levels. People just did stuff to each other, and there are tons of stories like that. People telling somebody that they messed up and there's a huge out trade, and we're down 50 grand and you better get in here to help, that it's a total joke, or calling people's wives and messing with them. So it was quite an interesting place to be. Even the names of people, you have Solly D, you have Harry the Hat, John Janos, Bugs Roger, DP Dave Pearlstein. So when I did Slim, it was to fit in like that. Psycho and Dummy, like all these guys and different characters, different ways of trading, different personality. It was kind of a neat place where you made friends. And the amazing thing is, by the time I got decent, I was probably working 2 to 3 hours a day, and in the middle going around the town with all the guys I'm working with. Like, it was really amazing. Now, you learn some bad habits, which will bring me to my worst trading day ever. Generally, everything that they teach you to do outside of the pit, you do the opposite inside the pit. You end up adding on to losers and getting out of winners for the most part, because our job is to make the markets liquid. So when the customers are selling, which means the market's probably going lower, we're constantly having to be the ones to buy the market. Now, we're trying to buy it lower and lower and lower until it's a good enough price that if it pops a little bit, you can get out and make a profit. But you tend to be doing things that really aren't advisable. And it's why I say so many times, like, it's why I actually mean it when I say, don't listen to me. I know I take on a lot of risk that I wouldn't recommend other people doing. I'll add on to things in a way that maybe one shouldn't. I've learned over the years that it works out more times than it doesn't. But in the times that it doesn't, it can really hurt. So here I am, and I'm selling into a rallying market. And the market keeps going higher. Now, when somebody buys a one lot at the exchange in the yen pit, that's 12,500,000 yen. Don't have an exact dollar amount that it is right now. The yen at 67 or 69. You're talking about $40,000 range per contract. But as the market moves, the dollar actually changes as to how big the contract is because it's based on yen. But it's $12.50 a tick. And the way that I think of it is, a one lot in the futures market is probably somewhat similar to 100 shares of stock. So you don't have to put up the money to be able to trade. You need to just have money to be able to be on the floor. You need a $50,000 T-bill that you put up as collateral, and then you can put as little as probably $10,000 into the account, and off you go to trade. You don't have to put up the cash to trade the futures that you're trading. Well, I had amassed maybe 20 or 30 contracts that I'm short, which is a pretty big position for me. So if I'm short 30 contracts, every tick, which is like a nothing move, is $375. It's going against me. So I finally just pushed the market a little higher as we went through what's called the figure or even. I don't remember which one it was, so let's pretend we are where we are now. And even is like 6900 or 7000 would both be even. Oftentimes, when you get above that, you start triggering some stop orders. And we start getting near it, and I just go, I'm even bid, I'm two bid, 5 on 5. And what I'm hoping to do is just push the market one more push to exhaust it where it can, go back the other way. Well, as soon as I say 5 on 5, Freddie Gelderman, who, he's a paper filling broker on the outside of the pit, goes 7 on 300, 10 on 300, and Todd goes at 25, and Freddie goes by 300. And I go, Todd, sell you 50. Now, this is a huge position for me. I'm short about 80 contracts because as soon as I said it, he knew that I had triggered the stop. I'm deserving of it. The market goes 25 offer, which is great. And then one of the bank traders comes in and they say 200 at 20, 200 at 20. And he's sitting there offering it. As I see the clerk for Smith Barney, who's one of the guys on the headset, like I'm talking about, say, hey, Mike, hey, Mike. And Mike's there in the pit trader. I'm 70 bid. I'm 70 bid. And Mike looks at me, and in my heart, I feel like he was giving me this opportunity to buy the ones being offered, but that is cheating. And like, I don't know, call me stupid, call me honest, like, really, it is. And I think he gave me that half second to buy them in front of him. I really do. But I just kind of head down was like, dude, they're yours. Now, he immediately, as soon as I hesitated and kind of looked at him, said, I'll buy them. I'm 70 bid. Because when one bank trader goes to start, like, they are all 70 bid. So he knew if he didn't grab those immediately, like, they'd be gone in a half second. Next thing we know, we're 80 bid. I never did the full math to know how much I was down. I know it was a little more than $100,000. And the scary thing is, it could have gone way worse. I also tell stories about how fortunate I was that I was so stupid to not realize how much risk I was taking when I was down there, because I would have never made as much money as I did if I was the person I am today. I would never put on the trades that I was putting on back then. I had no concept of how far the markets really might move and how much money I might have really lost. Like, that thing could have just gone another 4, 5, 600 points in a day. I've seen it happen. So I don't, anyway, I get out of the trade. I'm feeling terrible. I'm depressed. I'm thinking, what, this sucks. I don't know what I'm going to do. Driving home, and there's a homeless guy who's begging for money. And as I pull up to the red light and he's there, instantly I think, geez, I'm going home, going to my apartment. I'm going to have some dinner. I'm going to go to sleep. And then tomorrow I can wake up and I can come back and I can start over. I opened up the window. I gave the guy $100 and I went home. Maybe it was selfish in some ways, however you want to look at it, but there was this real recognition of how fortunate I was, as much as I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself. It was a real instance of like clarity of what's important and how to behave and so forth. Then the next day I went back to work and I started over. Now, I don't want to overstate it like, oh, I made it back like this or like that. That was a lot of money to me. And at the same time, it got my head focused while when I went back to trade properly, not trade too big. And I really did trade extremely well and made it back rather quickly, much quicker than I would have had I actually worked my way out of it and turned that into a small loss or a small profit. So, in some ways, it probably helped me out. I know that the whole aspect of it did. Seeing the homeless guy, giving him the money, recognizing like what's important and getting my head on straight about how to trade properly, in the end ended up probably making me more. But man, it was terrible and I really lost a ton of money, and it happened rather quickly. I mean, it couldn't have been but, I don't know, a minute or two. um, so that was my worst trading day. Be happy to talk more about some of the stories, explain the pip more. I hope you guys found it interesting. If you haven't already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, make comments, tell me what you think. Really, I love trading. It was such a great experience. From there, I didn't work for a few years before I moved out to Chicago. Um, I bounced around with different things once I came out here to Las Vegas. In a lot of ways, I was super lucky down there because I was really young, and it set me up in a good way for the rest of my life as long as I was careful and invested and uh, didn't go nuts. I did some stupid things. Of course, I was a kid. I used to come out here on vacation, which is way different than living out here. And it screwed me up in other ways. And I don't mean screwed me up, but it was very hard after that to ever get just like a 9 to 5 job, because the money that we had and the ups and downs, it was very hard to normalize and work a full shift at a company to get a salary. It really made that very difficult. So it's why I've had restaurants and ended up in mortgage because it's sales and whatever else, as well as doing investments and continuing to trade. Um, like I said, it was really lucky, but in some way, the one path of if you just got a job and stuck with it and grew your income and worked your way up. But this diversion that I had for a small amount of time um, would have made that really tough. On top of it, now it's very hard for me to listen to a boss. Uh, anyway, like I said, make your comments. Tell me what you guys are thinking. Tell me your thoughts on the market. I'm excited to see Nvidia's earnings tomorrow and how the market reacts to that. My prediction, and my God, it's all a total guess. Like, who knows? But I don't think it's going to be any surprise that Nvidia is going to have another really good quarter. And I think there's enough nervousness in the stock that it might continue to rally. I'm amazed. It seems to just keep going, but they seem to continue to grow their earnings. Now, of course, maybe I'm wrong and oversaturated, and maybe they even beat earnings and you'll see the stock price fall. But I'm really interested to see. They've been the company of the year, and tomorrow's a big deal. Pay attention to CrowdStrike too. I was lucky enough to pick it up on the Monday when the market collapsed. It's pretty obvious they had the blackout. So the earnings might be not wonderful, but they should be better than what people think. I don't think it's going to cost them as much as the market's nervous about. And the stock literally sold off from like $400 a share to I think $200 before that month or on that Monday. And they're a good company that has a lot of business and was growing at a rapid pace. Maybe it's just a phenomenal opportunity to be able to get in at half price. I don't know. But everyone's going to be focusing on the Nvidia earnings. I'm curious what happens with CrowdStrike. I'm hoping that even here I think they closed around $270 a share. I'm hoping that even here they're still oversold because it's just an overreaction to a one-time event that hopefully they've just moved past and continue to grow their company. Maybe they'll lose market share to some competitors over it, but I- part of me feels like if they impacted the world that much, it shows how important their company is. So I'm hoping it just like keeps chugging along and goes right back, and those who got out are going to kick themselves. Anyway, have a great day. I'm hoping to get this posted tonight. If not, today's Tuesday. I forget the actual date, but maybe it comes out late tonight or early tomorrow morning. Have a good day, guys. Whoop. I think I'm still recording. Hold on. My little thing didn't shut it off. I'll try it again. I'm like, what's it called in Ferris Bueller's Day Off? You're still here? What are you still doing here? Don't you know it's time to go? When he's in the show. Have a good night.